Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is Sackboy, and today I'm giving my first impressions on Sackboy: A Big Adventure. Now, I know that I'm quite late on this. It's been, like 6 days since it came out, maybe 5, but I've been quite busy the last week with the PlayStation 5 launching, me desperately trying to get one for 3 days, securing one that was supposed to be here yesterday and isn't here yet, so to kind of put a hold on that whole secure notion, but also, well, this. I have a new sort of setup that I'm going to try to use for more videos because I've been filming in here a lot more as opposed to at my desk, which is normally where I film, because my boyfriend is working in there and I don't want to disturb him, but hopefully the things are even and it's not too off and irritating everybody, but yeah, it's been a busy couple weeks, but I've also taken the time to play through the first world and a little bit of the second world of Sackboy: Big Adventure, and I'll be showing some of that gameplay today because I was playing in 2-player, which I think a lot of people, given social distancing and all that, haven't really had a chance to play in multiplayer, but I have, and I think I have a very good feeling of what this game is, what it isn't, and what I like and don't like about the game. So if you enjoyed this sort of first impressions video, feel free to leave a like down below, feel free to subscribe if you want to see more. I will have a full review of the game coming up when I finish it, which should be no more than a week or two because good lord, I'm excited for this game. It's gonna be so good. But if that sort of spoils this video for you, I apologize. But yeah, let's get right into first impressions, or we'll continue first impressions from that. So yeah, Sackboy: A Big Adventure has been out for a little while now. I've seen a lot of people streaming it. I've played it myself. And my thoughts on the game are mixed, but very positive mixed. They're mixed in the sense that this is very much not a Little Big Planet game, but it is very much a game within the Little Big Planet universe that does carry over a lot of aspects. And so I feel like that's going to leave a lot of people confused as to whether or not this game is for them. And so hopefully this will help anybody out there that's trying to decide whether or not they want to get it, or whether or not they want to get that really cool collector's edition, because it's so freaking cool and I'm so glad that I spent like all my money on it. But let's actually talk about things in pieces. So starting with the story itself and the cinematics that start out the game, I was able to get a very good impression that this is still a game in the Little Big Planet universe. There's still a big sort of weird bad that's attacking a craft world or a bunkum or something of that sort. In this case, it's called Craft World. And it's a pretty generic start. I don't think anybody is super surprised by that. Little Big Planet's never been super strong on like really intense overarching plot, but what they have been really good at is characters. And I think this is really cool because for the first time we're introduced to another Sack person who is a speaking, existing character. Now, I guess you could argue that a lot of other characters in the Little Big Planet universe that have sort of guided us through the game have been Sack people in some way or another, but this is the first one that I can say for certain is a Sack person. At least so far. Maybe there's some big reveal I'm missing, but I think that's really cool, and I think that it definitely frames the game a little bit differently than before, where we sort of had Stephen Fry overarching everything, and then these very specific, interesting characters. But now we have those interesting characters like the main villain, and like the first person that you meet there, whose name completely escapes me at this point, but so far, things are going well. Now we get into the gameplay, and things are still going well, but oh my goodness, very different. So with the gameplay of Sackboy: Big Adventure, the first thing that you have to know is that this is an action platformer. This is not a puzzle platformer anymore, except for very specific levels. This is an action platformer. If you're looking for what an action platformer is, well, I don't have a video on that, but I really should make one. But really look to Crash Bandicoot. That's a very good example of an action platformer with certain puzzle elements, but for the most part, it's very action-y, except for, I guess, the bonus levels. And that's what Sackboy: Big Adventure is. It's not like a puzzle platformer like Little Big Planet was, but there are those specific sections, namely the multiplayer levels that you'll unlock, that are very puzzly. And the bonus sections are somewhat puzzly, but more in like the traditional sense than sort of the puzzle platforming that we're used to with Little Big Planet. That, again, is reserved for the multiplayer segments and the multiplayer levels. Now, I think that later on in the game you do unlock some single-player puzzle sections, which I'm very excited to play at some point, but right now that seems to be the only element that plays very similar to Little Big Planet. But this is not a bad thing at all. if you enjoy action platformers, or just platformers in general, because I think in many ways Mario is an action platformer, and many just platformers are considered action platformers because, well, in essence, it's hard to define action, is the TLDR of that. But when you get into this game, you're going to notice that all of the new moves sort of lend themselves to this fast-paced but very calculated gameplay that they expect you to perform to finish these levels in the most efficient way possible. Now, there's still the sort of messing around that comes with Little Big Planet. You can do different emotes now, which is really cool, and I'll talk about more when I talk about costumes, but it's still a very fun and silly game at its core, and I think that when you're playing through it with a friend especially, you can really see that the soul of Little Big Planet is still there. Now, when it comes to the main enemy, I think that, going back to the previous section, it's not fully sold on them yet, and maybe that's one of the very few negatives, but then again, the Negativitron was not a particularly interesting enemy anyway, so maybe that's not as important of an idea when it comes to Little Big Planet or these sorts of games. Sorry, I'm filming this after, so if this feels a little bit awkward and cut into the middle of the video, I just remembered that one other really good part of the gameplay is the fact that they've fixed the issue of going off screen and having to kill yourself to stop your teammates from dying. Right now, as long as you're further on in the level, your friends can either choose to, or they can kind of be forcibly put into helicopter mode, as I'm calling it, where you suddenly rise up on this really adorable thing that carries you to your teammates, where then you can jump off and continue the level. Now, I haven't had to use it a lot because my boyfriend and I, who I've been playing with the game with so far, are very much on the same level. In other words, he's better than I am. So haven't really needed to use it a whole lot, but I'm very glad that it's there, and I think this is a much better idea than just killing anybody that falls off screen. Although, I suppose in some ways it's a little bit less funny. So moving on from the platforming elements and the bonus stages that I talked about, I now want to talk about the overworld before we get into costumes, which is probably what I'll talk about for a little bit too long. But the overworld is very different. It's very similar to the Mario DS and the new Super Mario Brothers games, because you have this overworld which has secrets in it, different things that you can sort of find by doing very specific things, but in the sort of overcooked way, you can now walk freely around the entire overworld to discover these secrets. It's very interesting and very different than the pod in Little Big Planet, and it's definitely more detailed than the Earth or Bunkum within the Little Big Planet games were, but I'm not sure if I prefer it. I think I'm sort of even on both of them, because while this is super interesting, the fact that you have things to explore within the world, I did enjoy having the pod and the home space in Dreams now, where you can decorate it yourself, and more importantly, while you're kind of figuring things out or between levels in multiplayer, you can sort of mess around and have fun and be silly outside of that. And you can still do that in the levels, but I think it's just weird because you do have a limited moveset in the overworld, and it's just different enough that it doesn't have that sort of messing around silliness that I enjoyed with the pod. Again, there are benefits to it, there are sort of things that are worse than the pod, but I think in the end it evens out, and I would say that it's at least as good as the pod and the overworld within Little Big Planet. Now, moving forward onto costumes, this is another thing that has changed pretty significantly at first, but I think what I've realized the more I've played is that there's enough here that makes it still feel like the costume system in Little Big Planet for it to be as close as it probably should be. So the biggest change is that now you have to buy every single costume piece except for a handful of them. Just let's say the vast majority of costume pieces, you have to buy them with collectibles. You collect those things in the same way that you did in the past Little Big Planet games, where you would sort of find them, or I guess it's just Little Big Planet 3, but where you would find them throughout the levels, and they were sort of a bit tougher to find than score bubbles, but you also collect them based on various other things. There are still end-of-level completion bonuses, the acing the level and collecting all of the items in that level, but the items that you find, namely costume pieces, are going to be a lot more rare in that respect, and you're going to have to spend a lot more time completing these levels to collect costume pieces in that way. However, I think people will prefer this because now the collectibles that you get just by playing the game without really trying too hard are more than enough to buy a few costume pieces, or I guess a couple costume pieces after every single level, which is pretty much what you would unlock anyways. The difference here is that now, sort of like you would gather, let's say, 4 or 5 full costumes within the first world of Little Big Planet, well, in the second level, after the first level that you complete, you unlock all of those costumes to then buy with these collectibles. So you can sort of pick the pieces that you want to unlock and unlock them in any order that you want. And so instead of looking for them within specific levels, now you sort of collect collectibles in all those levels and then take those to then buy the costume pieces in any order you want. I think a lot of people are going to like this because player agency is something that is like it's sort of a marketing keyword at this point in most video games, where people like to have control over different aspects of the game in pretty much any way that makes sense without taking away from the game. Now, I think that this removes a lot of nuance that the Little Big Planet series has, but I still think that most people will like it, and I want to say that first before I get into my opinions on it. And I'll do that right at the end of this section, but first I want to continue to talk about the costumes themselves because they're gorgeous. Just like every single level that I've played so far is gorgeous. They had so much more time and clearly put so much more effort into the graphics and the way that everything moves, the physics of the game, than they did in Little Big Planet because they don't have to worry about the create mode. And I think you can see that in how detailed a lot of these costumes are. I love how detailed they are. They are as detailed as some of the promotional images for Little Big Planet, but actually in-game. They're huge, they take up a lot of space, they change the shape and the silhouette of Sackboy a lot more than we'd seen in the Little Big Planet games, and they also don't seem to sort of get in the way like some of the larger, more obnoxious costumes sort of did in Little Big Planet. And I think that that is a huge positive. On top of that, every single costume piece, or at least everyone I've encountered so far, there may be some exceptions to this, but everyone I've encountered so far can be colored in any number of like 8 to 10 colors. I didn't count exactly how many, but you can essentially take all of those little circles of paint that you would use to sticker your costumes in Little Big Planet, and that's all available in the costume selection menu, which is pretty awesome and pretty exciting for anybody out there that likes to color match everything like I do with my bright green-haired Sackboy that exists in every single game that I've played. But yes, the costume pieces are great, it's awesome that you can still color them, and it still feels so Little Big Planet. But there's some exceptions to that. One of them is the fact that all of these costumes need to be changed and figured out before a level starts. Now, to change and save specific costumes, you have to do that at a specific level within the game. Now, it's cool because in multiplayer, you can do this all at the same time. There's no issues there. I think that's something we should expect from games like this, but in other games where there's just multiplayer added on, you can't always change those at the same time, so I just want to give them props for actually doing that. But then, once you start a level, you can take any of your save costumes and sort of switch between them before you start, and then everybody readies up and you start the level. However, you can't change your costume in the level. Now, this might seem like a very minor thing to a lot of people, and it probably is, but to me, this is sort of reminiscent of a lot of other changes they've made, where there's a lot less messing around in the levels. There's a lot less silliness that goes into these levels when you can't sticker things, you can't staple things like decorations and stickers from Little Big Planet, and you also can't just switch your costumes around while someone's going to the bathroom in multiplayer. It's a small change, and it's something that I don't think a lot of people will notice, especially in single player, but it's something that sort of changes the feel of these levels, where in Little Big Planet, again, one of the funnest things was messing around in these levels. And while you can still do that, and you don't really have to focus on the completion aspect, you can still emote, you can still run around and punch your friends, you can still throw each other all over the game, and there's enough silliness to where it still feels like a Little Big Planet series game, but it doesn't have the exact same feel as the sort of messing around that came from changing costumes and stickers and decorations within Little Big Planet. Overall, the great aspects of Sackboy Big Adventure are very great. I'm very happy with the majority of the game. And so finally here, because I know a lot of people don't watch my entire video, which is why I put this at the end, but the few negatives that I've been able to find so far are, one, this is a very possible and potential negative. If you do prefer puzzle platformers, this game might not be for you if you just don't enjoy action platformers. But I would say give it a try anyways, because especially the off levels and certain sections of the main levels do have very puzzly elements of them, and it's still there. It's just not as big of a focus as it was in Little Big Planet. Another one, and this is a very personal one to me, is that I don't really like the collectible system. I know that it kind of induces player agency, which is good and a lot of people will like, but I particularly enjoyed the aspect of Little Big Planet where you would have to find, I see someone online wearing this piece of armor or this piece of this headpiece or these pants or these shoes, I guess. Mostly it was the hand accessories, right? Everybody really only cared about the hand accessories. But the idea of seeing someone with that or seeing it online or seeing it somewhere in the game and not having it, and then having to figure out what level it was in and go back and find it, that gameplay loop and that sort of impulse to replay old levels for very specific goals was something that I really enjoyed about Little Big Planet, and it's something that I think helped a lot of people that don't really like to complete games, but more like to sort of finiplete it, as the completionists used to call it, where you do the whole game and play the whole game, but sort of do various aspects of completion that aren't really required, but are more personal goals of yours. And I feel like that was something that was really evident by the specific costumes that you could go and collect within the story mode. Now, those still exist, but it's, again, largely as completion bonuses, and the few that are scattered throughout the levels are, like I said, few and far in between. You're largely going to be purchasing all of your costumes, nearly all of your costumes, through collectibles. But yeah, I think that very short list is all of the negative things I have to say about this game so far. But yeah, first impressions video, very long. I will be focusing more on the game in general, not in relation to Little Big Planet in the future, but being that this is a channel that's largely focused on Little Big Planet and Dreams and creative games like that, I felt like it was important to mention. And I think I may have said this at some point, but yeah, there's no create mode. I didn't want to focus on that too much because we knew that, and because that was sort of the reason for this game, was to sort of direct those resources toward actually making a game as opposed to focusing so largely on making a create mode. I do think that in some ways they could introduce a create mode with this. It just feels like there's a lot of objects in it and like things that you could easily move around and play with yourself. But I feel like if they were to do it at this point, it would just be so much less than what we had in Little Big Planet, and so it might be more disappointing than exciting. I don't know. I would like to see even a minimal create mode in this because I love all the assets. They seem so Little Big Planet. They're so in the same universe that I would love to play around with them as a creator. But yeah, that's something important to mention if you didn't already know that. But regardless, let me know what you guys think about this game in the comments down below. Is it sort of weird to play through somewhat less full of bubbles episodes? Levels of this game, or are you really enjoying the new goals that you have, the new moves that Sackboy has? Let me know. I mean, my thoughts are my thoughts, and they probably are not what everybody else is thinking out there, but I have seen pretty positive reception from the community, which, when it comes to the internet, like, you expect everybody to just be mad for every reason that there possibly could be, instead of excited for the good reasons. But I think our community has actually treated this game pretty well, and as much as I would love a create mode, I'm glad about that, because I love this world and I want to see more of it regardless of what form it's in. But yeah, like I said, let me know what you guys think. I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Have a wonderful day. And for now, goodbye, everybody.